Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby-peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Yeah, hello Nest family for the first time in 2022. I think we've now stretched over to 3 separate years, have we not, Drewy? End of 2020, 2021. Now we start in 2022. So, yeah, we're getting a bit of experience under our belt in that sense, at least, which is good. Happy New Year to everyone. We go for another season, obviously, but yeah, another year, Drewy. Hello to you, mate.
G'day, Garby. Yeah, Happy New Year. 2022 still feels weird. Made a critical error at work the other day. I was doing a piece to camera and just said 2021 because I just hadn't got my head around the fact we're into a new year because it's all rolling into one, isn't it? And the same issues keep popping up. But anyway, it's good to be back. And as always, there is actually a fair bit of West Coast stuff to talk about. And unfortunately, it's as in keeping with the last year or so, it's not all that positive, is it?
I can't think of one real positive in terms of news. Like, I mean, there's maybe some positive observations about the preseason, which we'll start with in a minute, but actual news to come out of the team, none. It's all pretty ordinary so far. So we'll delve into all of those issues because they are important. And we've been planning to do this podcast for a while. It's not as if we're just the bad news bears who thought we better do one because of all this stuff that's happening. We had been planning and then it just kept cropping up before we could find a date that suited us both. We will get onto all those issues. We'll have a look at the AFLW team as well. Drewy's spoken to Eliza Riley from the West. So we'll talk about the girls and how they're going in West Coast Eagles colours. And then we'll get to your questions, which include, as it stands, our best 22s right now, sans injuries. So take all injuries aside, just everyone's fit. What is your best 22? Drewy, I dare say we'll revisit it a week or two before the season. So we'll do it now. Then we'll, get closer to the start of the season. We'll see where all the injuries are at, where all the preseason form is at, and ahead of round one, we'll go it again and see how it matches up with our January, end of January, best 22s. So I'm sure people will love listening to, who we think we've got on paper right now to get excited for round one. And to be honest, Drewy, as we delve right into it now, as of 2-3 weeks ago, I was really excited for the season. Observing from afar, and that's where we want to start this Nest podcast. It looked as if the team was refreshed mentally, and they still are, of course, and as if they had a bit of a healthy chip on their shoulder, following on from last season, which was so disappointing. They seem to have a look in their eye, just observing preseason training that says, no, we're out to make amends. We're out to do things differently. They seemed really set on a big campaign, and you just picked up little things that seemed a little bit different about the boys going into this season. Moving all of the nonsense aside that's happened in the last week or two, that was my feeling about the team, and I was really positive about the campaign. What about you?
Yeah, it's a shame. It feels like this has really halted momentum that the club has been able to build up, whether that's all external and sort of, wallpapering or not. That doesn't really matter at this time of the year. Like, it's all about building up what you're doing internally, the training sessions, the improvements across the board. And I thought the club seemed to be doing that fairly well. And both of us living interstate, the way that we're interacting with the team is by reading, stories written by local scribes and catching stuff that Ryan Daniels has done or Lockie Reed has done and sort of post on their social media. And West Coast actually have allowed media into training sessions where they've been doing match simulation stuff, where they've been able to reporters have been able to actually look at what they're doing. And there has been reports about fast ball movement, about using the corridor, run and carry, and that tweaking of the game plan, the getting in of the new assistant coaches, the acknowledgement from the club that they have to change the way they're doing things to utilise the talent on the list and try and compete in finals and for flags, that all seemed to be following the script that we hoped that it would. So from my point of view, and while I do try and switch off footy for a little bit, at least during the summer, it's been positive to think, geez, we're heading into a new year. Hopefully we're going to see our team play some exciting footy. Maybe we won't win 15 games. Maybe we will, who knows? But the fact that it was something fresh and exciting, I think had a lot of West Coast fans excited. So certainly the events of the last week or so have dampened that enthusiasm. And I just hope and pray that it doesn't seep into the playing group and really start to mess with our start to the year.
Yeah, agreed on that. Tackling's been another part of the preseason focus, clearly. I mean, the players have openly admitted that. They were a poor tackling team last year. Geez, blind Freddie would have spotted that. But they've seemed to have, on social media, pushing out tackling training, almost saying to the fans, like, we're trying to rectify this. Contest work, non-stop contest work. And so that's been a focus, which is great. In terms of the stuff that's happened, so we're going to go through them all, but okay, the border closures, Jack Darling not being vaccinated and being now suspended from the club, and Luke Shuey going down about an hour before we signed on to do this podcast in match simulation. Those are the three big things that have happened in the past couple of weeks. We'll get onto those in a moment. I want to talk about a couple of players that maybe caught your eye, though, while we're still on the positives. Players, body-wise, that you thought have made a big impact. I've loved seeing Willie Rioli's body change through photos through pre-season. Like looking at where he was at the start of pre-season, you went, unsurprisingly, he's got a lot of work to do. He had a lot of time out and he's not a naturally ripped guy. So you look and you went, oh, geez, how bad is it going to be for him conditioning-wise those 2 years out? He looks good now. He looks trim. He looks like he's back to his 2018 sort of playing weight. And Tim Kelly's the other one. I mean, I'm honoured to him. We've spoken about this before, closer than anyone, because I think he can fluctuate. He looks in really good shape. And we know that he was reluctant to be vaccinated, got it done before the deadline, which is great. Hopefully that's freed him up mentally now. It's done. It's out of the way. But he looks in really good nick. So they were the two that caught my eye. Anyone else for you make an impact in terms of the optics and how they're looking pre-season wise?
Someone who's been on my radar and excites me is Isaiah Winder. Like the ceiling maybe that he's got and what he represents potentially for our game plan moving forward. There is someone who runs with the ball, who bounces. He at the time we remembered him being a bit of a speculative pick, and he got that debut out of the blue after a few things happened. I think Shannon Hearn hurt his calf against the Bulldogs and he comes in. So early days for him. But I just connect Winder with potentially what we might be trying to create. Him and Chesser and the young guys who can run and carry. So he was one in particular that I'm excited for, hopefully to make a big impact this year.
Harry Edwards is another one for me. You just look through the social media and you get the feeling they're happy to promote him. They're happy to promote his preseason and what he's doing. They're happy to say, he's probably going to be a regular 22. Some of the player comments, they talk about how strong he's looked in preseason. I saw he was actually listed on the team sheets that they posted ahead of the match sim today. He was listed as a ruck on the sheet, on the board that Ryan Daniels was kind enough to post for us. So, that starts, I did my best 22. That's how I included him, if you like, to maybe pinch hit or provide cover for someone else to go and pinch hit because he can do a bit of that role. Maybe he shares it with a Jeremy McGovern throughout the season behind Nick. So that was another one that stood out for me as an encouraging developer during the off-season. Sam Petrevsky-Seton as well looks pretty good. I think he looks like he's pretty focused and switched on and could have a big impact. So, that were some of the ones that were noticeable for mine.
Yeah, and interesting just reading about Liam Duggan, his recovery from the knee, he said has been a little bit slower than he thought it might have been, but he is back to somewhere near full training, which is encouraging because his drop-off in form, and obviously that was brought about by a few niggly injuries, which he tried to play through and then eventually succumbed to last season. That really affected us. He's an important cog. So the fact that he's getting back to full fitness, we know Elliot Yeo and Nick Naitanui, they actually had a little extended break from full training just to make sure they're going to be fresh and right to go for the start of the season. So fitness-wise, things seemed to be trending fairly well. And unfortunately, as you mentioned before, Garby, there is a developing fitness issue with Luke Shuey basically at the start of the match, him coming off. He took out the GPS and went down the room. So, yeah, I mean, our fingers are crossed that it's not serious, but quite possibly it could be another soft tissue. And I noticed that Benny Cameron reported that he had a little setback pre-Christmas with the hamstring as well. So that brings it up to about 26 hamstring injuries in 3 years for Luke Shuey.
I mean, it just sucks, but it's time. If he's out for another 3 weeks to a month, within that period, he has to stand down as captain. Like, it just makes complete sense. Like, he's just no guarantee he's going to be out on the park long enough. I've got a massive battle, clearly, just to play for this team and get my body right with the amount of injuries I've had. We've got a ready-made captain there who's pretty much the captain in all but everything, bar the title in Nick Natanui. Yeah, I'll step down. Nick, you take over. Let me focus on my body. That seems like the move for me. And we spoke about this last year as well.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we flagged this a long way out. But I just think now it's getting to a point where even if Luke doesn't want to do it, I think it's just best for all parties. And I think Luke Shuey is a fantastic captain.
Yeah.
He's everything that I love about West Coast. And I think he embodies a lot of the values which the 2018 flag was built on. But it's not best for him to have all the other things that come with being a captain. Like, even if you want to set aside some of the responsibilities and hand it over to other people, it's not good enough. Like, he just needs to be able to he needs to be selfish and put 100% of his efforts into being fit and staying on the park.
Yeah, he needs to be selfish and selfless. So, selfish in that he needs to focus on himself, but he needs to also be a bit selfless and say, well, I'm not going to do it. As much as you want to have that title, as much as he would feel hard done by because he hasn't fully been able to show what he can do as captain on the park. I think anyone naturally would want to be able to lead like a captain's meant to lead and have a brilliant season and be that player and put on the Superman cape and do all those things. He needs to, if this is another long layoff, unfortunately, give that dream up and give it to someone else, because he's not going to be doing it if he's got another problem. Like, it's just not going to miraculously get better from here on in, and he's all fine. It's going to be something he battles with, you would think, for the remaining, hopefully 2-3 years of his career, if he can get through those. So I think it's time to hand it off, but that depends on what the outcome is of this. Maybe he's being ultra conservative because of the problems he's had, and he went, something very small, but there's no point at this stage of the year resting it. So, see you guys, I'm off, someone else go on. Maybe that's the story. We don't know yet. Yeah,
and that's it. We don't want to jump the gun too much. But, we're all Luke Shuey fans. If you're a West Coast fan, you love him. So we just want, we want him back on the park, and we're a better team when he's out there, no matter what role or what he's doing. So long as the hamstrings are intact, then he makes our football team better. So, yeah, fingers crossed for Luke. I mean, I hope, he's been through a bit. I can imagine how debilitating it would be to continuously re-injure the hammies and not be able to, do what you do and be out in the park. Yeah. So hopefully he's going okay. But obviously there are bigger things going on than hamstrings, so I don't want to get too emotional about it.
Exactly.
And you know what, like what's happened around WA and the West Coast team, that illustrates that some things outside of football are a bit bigger. So the border closures, Garby, I think this opens up a whole other set of questions. Do you want to go into that now, or do you want to go to Darling?
I think let's go Darling now, and let's get on to border closures next. So Shepherd's gone down, horrible. Who knows what the deal is with Luke Shuey, and Jack Darling's not going to be playing for the Eagles in the foreseeable future. It's such a massive shame. We're getting into a very controversial issue. The messaging out of the club and him were completely contradictory. That was pretty funny in the end. Like, what are you on about? The Eagles wouldn't have put out a statement like that if it was anything else other than a refusal to get vaccinated. So Jack's head's obviously in a very weird place about it all. I'll give it to you first, Drew, and I'll give my thoughts, I guess, as we delve into the situation a little bit more. But your take on it, if you want to nail down a specific part of it, which is not that easy to do on a sensitive issue.
So my view is that I strongly disagree with the way that Darling has handled the situation.
Yeah.
But I also do respect that people have a right to choose when it comes to their medical health in life. But I'm very much pro-vaccination, and I want to, and that obviously as living in Victoria as a Western Australian, one extra person not getting vaccinated in WA, to me, like that's a real kick in the teeth for me. And it's hard to separate those personal feelings and not be subjective. But he has a right to choose. And if he believes that's what is best for his health, then I'm not going to shit can him for that. But my view broadly is that athletes are required to make certain sacrifices in order to earn the big pay packets that are given to them. And part of that is medically doing what you have to do to be fit to play. And part of that is getting vaccinated against COVID-19. So I think it's really disappointing. I think he lets down the club and his teammates by not doing it, especially when you look at the way that Tim Kelly eventually agreed to do it. I mean, he should have done it straight away, but he at least eventually jumped on board. So I was upset and I was disappointed. And I was probably angry initially, but after, a few days and whatever, you sort of calm down and you got to look at it more broadly. So respect the right to choose, but very, very vehemently disagree with his process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page as you. People can do what they like, but personally, I don't have any sympathy, Drew, for anti-vaxxers. I just think it's the wrong decision. I think all the information you're presented with clearly shows that. And it's a shame that he's been led down another path. So hopefully he comes to his senses, either by way of realizing that his footy career is going to be stopped if he doesn't do this, or if he's waiting for another form of vaccination, like the Novavax they're talking about. Maybe that's what his statement was all about. Maybe he's hoping that holds him off for a few months. He gets that vaccination, which is supposedly more helpful for athletes. I have no idea, but that's something I've read. And then he comes back in that time and he thinks, well, nobody was any the wiser. Well, we would be the wiser, but either way, it's just very disappointing. It's a shame that there were always going to be a few cases in the AFL. You hoped it wasn't your club. It's a shame that it is, but that's what he's chosen. Well, he unfortunately is the one that is going to suffer, because not only is he not protected medically, which is the main issue, he gives up a massive salary. You're not going to earn that money doing anything else in the near future, Jack, and it's so avoidable, so easily avoidable. But unfortunately, that's, a part of society thinks that way, and we respect them for having a different view. But obviously, we don't agree with it. And yeah, of course, he's let himself and his club down. There's no other way of framing it.
Well, he's let his club and his teammates down. As far as letting himself down, that's a matter of opinion. He doesn't feel that way.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
The Novavax has been approved in Australia and rolls out in February.
Okay.
So whether that, maybe it's a quick fix. Like maybe he's back at the club in 4 weeks. If the AFL, I would dare say, would approve Novavax if the Australian, Medical Association approve it. So I don't think there's any issues there.
If he's specifically waiting for that, then cool. And then, that's again unnecessary wait, in my opinion. But hey, if you're so ardent that it has to be that form of vaccination, great. But if it's not that, and you're actually, that's not even an option for you either, well then, that's going to be very, very, very disappointing.
Yeah, I wonder about the overall feeling from West Coast fans towards Darling. I mean, generally in this situation, we as fans find it hard to reconcile when highly paid athletes act in this way. But I have noticed from reading the comments that there do seem to be people supporting Jack in terms of, he's making this decision and he's allowed to refuse, ABC and look after his health and his body. And and all that sort of thing. So, and I don't know if there's a particular WA sentiment or whether that's reflected all around Australia. I don't know. But all I've seen from every other supporter of every other club is general distaste towards Darling. There's not a lot of support out there for him. And, it's a tough one. Like we've never encountered these sort of discussions really throughout the history of the AFL and certainly in our lifetime.
So one thing that has annoyed me, a couple of the smart ass comments, not from Eagles fans because they're more intelligent than that because they've observed him so closely, but a few from opposition fans, a couple like, I forgot Jack Darling was playing, or someone had a crack at the quote in the Eagles statement saying outstanding career. I was like, what competition have you been watching? Have you not seen what this guy's done over the last 236 games? I mean, Premiership player, All-Australian 2019. Someone wrote, I thought he stopped playing after 2018. He was an All-Australian in 2019, you goose. And he would have got another one if not for injury. So some people are just a bit boneheaded like that. And he's the third best key forward in West Coast history. That cannot be disputed. Sumich, Kennedy, Darling. Kennedy first, Sumich, Darling. And then there's, Quinton Lynch, workhorse, but look at his goals record. It doesn't get anywhere near to Jack. Ashley Hansen, we loved, but talent-wise, didn't get near to Jack. And then you've got Brett Hetty was a half forward. Lakra was, and the rest weren't exactly key forwards. Mitchell White had a good couple of seasons. Scott Cummings, good couple of seasons. He's played 236 games, Jack Darling.
Yeah.
People forget how long he's been there for. And he's the third highest goal kicker at the club by some margin. And he could overtake Peter Sumich by the time he's done if he does return. So I hope he gets his respect in that sense, because regardless of what he's doing now, which is regrettable, that doesn't take away from what you've achieved already.
No, I don't think so. And my view on this is just everyone outside of West Coast will just remember the two drop marks in grand finals. They don't remember the rest of the selfless putting body on the line, team first and goal kicking. He kicked 5 goals in a quarter last season.
We don't win the 2018 grand final without Jack Darling in the third quarter.
Yeah,
I'm adamant about that.
He was insane. So,
I know he didn't do anything for a half, but we don't win it without his third quarter.
Yep.
So he's performed on a big stage as well. He bounced back from 2015 and the drop mark, but we still won the game. So, that's just the way it is.
I'm hopeful this isn't the full stop and this is what we end up sort of remembering him by, or it ends up tarring the career, as you said, third highest key forward goal kicker and 236 games.
Just to finish on before we move on. So, Ryan Daniel's story on Jack for Channel 7 News was really good. And he highlighted his mother-in-law who was very active in anti-vax rallies. So that makes you wonder, is the Novavax, if that is what he's waiting for, is that the case or not? Will that make a difference or not? If he's fully on board with what his mother-in-law thinks, maybe he's not. Maybe he has differing views to her. Maybe his anti-vax views are tapered down enormously. We don't know. But if he's fully on board with that, then I don't see how another vaccine is actually a solution. But hopefully it is. Hopefully that's what he's waiting for, and he's back patrolling the forward line as quickly as possible.
So what about the borders?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously for you and I, a real blow. I mean, not as much for you because your family live in Victoria now, but for any West Coast fan who wants to be able to get back to WA, who lives abroad or interstate, who wants to see their family, horrible. Anyone in WA who wants to visit friends and family on the East Coast, a real kick in the teeth. Yeah. But setting aside all of the personal, emotional stuff, it has the potential to, again, affect the seasons for the WA clubs. And it also has occurred to me that I assume that the majority of the West Coast's list have not had COVID. They're probably going to get it this year at some stage, which means that our season could be compromised at various times, having COVID rip through the club.
Yeah, I mean, the AFL's got to put a protocol in place. I mean, you and I both follow the English Premier League, and it's been a joke how there has been no rules established in that league, when probably the biggest sporting league in the world, in terms of how you manage it. So teams have exploited it. My team, Liverpool's exploited it. Your team, Arsenal's exploited it. They've all tried to find loopholes.
Well, so if you haven't exploited it, then it's been to the detriment of your team. Like, it's been the professional thing to do has been exploit the rule.
Yeah. So the AFL will hopefully put a protocol in place whereby if there are a certain number of players are out strictly with COVID, then you can postpone a game or whatnot. So, hopefully that will mean that we're okay in that sense. Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen there, but I would imagine, Drewy, we won't be starting the season based in Perth. Like, I don't see how that's going to happen between February 5 and March 16 the season starts.
I can't see how we would start in WA unless Mark McGowan's going to have to be really, really flexible, which he has not shown any aptitude for so far, to allow a team to fly in from Victoria and act relatively normally. Because you can't tell me that clubs are going to be okay with doing this whole charade again about flying in on the day and not leaving the hotel and being considered dirty and all that stuff when they can travel anywhere else in the world and act normally, but they can't come to WA. So that can't continue. So I think it's just going to be, kiss the families goodbye and maybe we'll see you in 6 or 7 weeks.
From afar, it's absolutely pathetic. Like, I just don't understand why the borders are still closed. I think there's a lot of, it seems like they're almost trying to brainwash the WA public. Like the WA health minister coming out the other day saying, the eastern states are virtually in lockdown, anything but name. I'm like, what? We're living 100% normally, apart from wearing a mask indoors and having the risk of getting COVID and then having a 7-day isolation if you get it, which is how the rest of the world is operating right now, by the way. So it's just, I don't understand it whatsoever. I feel for people who are having their mental health seriously tested by this and their lives ripped apart by not being able to see loved ones. I know there's a lot of West Australians who don't have any family or business interests outside of WA and they want the borders closed. I understand that position. Why do they want their lives threatened? But ultimately, WA is a great state and it's being ridiculed right now for good reason because of what's going on. And you want it to reclaim its status as a fabulous place to visit. And we want to have our sporting teams are unbelievable, playing in one of the best stadiums or the second best stadium, maybe the first in some people's eyes, in the country, and showcasing what we're all about. And we're not going to do that to start the season. From an Eagles point of view, Drewy, I'm not that worried about the form. I don't know why. I just think we would have learned a lot from the hub over the last 2 years. And they've still got that glint in their eye. And I think we'll be okay in that sense. I mean, obviously we're a stronger team at home, no doubt. So it's going to affect us a little bit, but I don't see it being that big. They're going to drop their bundle completely about this and the season's going to be washed away off the back of hubbing once more. I think they'll be okay in that sense.
Frustration for me, and as I've articulated on the podcast over the last year, I guess, is I just want to see this team have a clear run at it in a normal AFL season.
Yeah.
And like maybe it's just not going to happen. And, that's a real shame. So anyway, come what may, there's still a lot of time to pass until the start of the season. And who knows what's going to happen. If West Coast have to hub over East, then all the better for us, Gar, because there's a chance we can watch them live and enjoy watching our team in a football stadium full of fans probably yelling at us.
So where would they go if you reckon they hub? I mean, Gold Coast is a good option because they've got lots of space and golf courses, but it didn't really work out that well for us last time. We had a good record in Sydney at the SCG. I would say it's Sydney or Gold Coast, you would think, but they might want to go Melbourne from a fixturing point of view because you generally play more games there.
What about Geelong?
Gold Coast easily.
Should we do a Geelong hub?
Well, no, because we suck there and the weather's not exactly that pleasant there either. It's a little bit colder.
I would wonder if they take the opportunity to hub in Victoria at the start of the season, because that's the best until the end of the season. That's the best conditions you're going to get in Melbourne. Like the weather's still okay. It's not too cold yet. I think we've got a couple of Victorian games early. I haven't got the fixtures in front of me. I reckon we might have a couple early. Yeah. And are they rescheduled fixtures, or do we play our home games at Marvel? All that sort of stuff. I don't know. But I like the idea of Melbourne early. I would hate to see us playing twilight and evening games at the Gabba with the dew early in the year. Like that's a recipe for disaster. We've been down that road. Yeah.
Selfishly, I'd love us in Sydney so I could watch us every week. But I would like the team to go to Melbourne. Start the campaign. I don't want it to be, as a fan, I don't want it to be a holiday type Gold Coast vibe. Like, no, the season started. You don't need a hub in a hotel to be secluded. Like, you're joining the real world if you're moving over here. Hub in Melbourne around footy, like breathe, eat, drink footy, right? So you're focused on your job. Also, we have a truckload of fans in Melbourne. Like, we sometimes get 10,000 Eagles fans to away games in Melbourne, so we'll have good supporter bases there.
Yeah.
A lot of the boys are Victorian. They're around their families. That'll make them feel better. So Melbourne, to me, number one option. Then Sydney probably 2, and then Queensland 3. That would be my preference.
Adelaide Oval, I wouldn't object to. You normally play the ground well, and maybe, I was going to say being closer to home would help, but don't see that doesn't really help. But I wouldn't rule out Adelaide, but Melbourne, I guess, is the fit. But look, we're all speculating. We don't know what's going on. We just hope that sanity will prevail at some stage.
Sometimes we refer to Trevor Nisbett as the Godfather. I'd like to see a Godfather type situation. Nisbett, the chairman, just leaning on Mark McGowan a little bit, just saying, mate, do you have any idea how much power we have in the state? Like, have you actually stopped to think where we sit in the grand scheme of things? There's some mining companies, and then there's the Eagles. And maybe in terms of complete community reach, we're above them. I'd suggest you maybe have a rethink as soon as possible for the good of your political future, Mr. McGowan.
I like the idea that Trevor Nisbett potentially does influence elections and various other things that happen inside the state. And look, honestly, it wouldn't shock me if that was the case.
Well, they try to do that with the stadium. Don't worry about that.
Yeah,
when that stadium is being built, they were doing a lot of leaning on people.
Yep.
Look, a casual reminder of how much money the Eagles and the Dockers put into WA, I don't think is necessarily a unsavoury act at this stage, considering how serious the situation is in Western Australia. So
well, you
sure
imagine
they'll be having some words.
Imagine the phone call with Gill, where he's like, "We gave you the bloody grand final, and now you do this to us."
Yeah.
And anyway, so what have you made of the AFLW stuff? I know we're kind of getting onto this a little bit late, and I guess it's probably been discussed ad nauseum. But popped up last week, and Eliza Riley and I had this discussion last week. So we touch on her, and she initially broke the story, and it was a really good yarn. And then we talk a little bit about how the season's been going for West Coast. They lost to Adelaide on the weekend. But it was the Friday on the same day that the Darling stuff came out, and the morning after the border stuff had happened. So WA was all like not kicking goals. West Coast and WA were in everyone's bad books. And then Michael Pryor said along the lines of the AFLW West Coast coach, "I'm a bit sick of this pride stuff. It's been done to death."
Yeah.
And that really pissed me off. I really hated what that line represented.
I mean, it was just a terribly stupid choice of words. That's what it was. I don't think he actually meant, I don't know, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't mean, I don't care about representing homosexual players or whatnot, or what it stands for. I don't think he meant that. I think he meant we've discussed it so often, because the players are apparently designing their own jumper or something like that, and it had been a constant talking point. And then to come out with those words was just dumb. And it just, I mean, he had to backtrack in a statement and clarify, not backtrack, but clarify what he meant in a statement and explain it further. So that wasn't a great moment for him. It was just silly. And the first thing I thought, Drew, was it's the second or third poor choice of words from our coaches in the last year. Like we had the Adam Simpson saga last year, where he spoke about, not drafting players from lower socioeconomic environments or affected family environments because of the changes to the salary cap and draft rules and the longer time you're going to need to develop players. And I thought that was, insulting to a lot of people. And then this, so that's what I thought. Why are we making these mishaps publicly from our coaches? And what are people saying behind closed doors that is leading them to come out with just comments that affect the brand of the club? That's what occurred to me straight away.
So it was a poor decision by West Coast to not have a pride round jumper.
Yeah, of course it is.
I think they have to take 95% of the blame, and then the AFL have to take a little bit of the blame for possibly not alerting West Coast that every other club had planned to do something. Like they needed to say, all right, we haven't ticked you off on our list. Like, what are you guys doing for Pride Round? Like, it's just embarrassing, really. And it's a PR free kick to be able to put a social media post out with this lovely jumper that you've designed. There's a story behind it. You can say some nice words about what Pride means to the club and supporting the wider community as far as homosexuality and gender diversity and all that sort of stuff. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm going to be a mouthpiece for that part of the community, but I'm pretty sure anyone involved with West Coast in a broader sense, part of the West Coast community who hail from those backgrounds, seeing a team run out in a Pride jumper, that would mean a lot to them.
Of course. Why didn't we have one at the same time as everyone else? What's the reason?
The line from the club was that they weren't able to put the time and resources into doing it in a way they felt was going to be really worthwhile. So not only do they want to release the jumper, they also want to have educational programs for the players and various other bits and bobs. You know, like if you were doing an Indigenous jumper, you would want the elders, local elders to be there, maybe a smoke ceremony. You have the people who designed it tell the story, all that sort of stuff, which I understand. There is also an aesthetic and a PR responsibility to do what's right. So you can balance the two. So like last week in the lead up to the Pride Round weekend, after this initial story came out, they started saying, well, we're planning one for next year. Well, who the fuck cares? Like, that's too late. Like that. So that really annoyed me anyway. And then for him to compound it by those choice of words, like, I'm sorry, you're in the wrong. You just have to keep trotting out the line.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate we don't have it. We're working on it for next year. Pride Round means a lot to West Coast. We want to be an inclusive club. Like, you know, just keep trotting out the line no matter how sick of it you are.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that annoyed me. And I thought it was just another own goal on a really tough day. I thought the release from later in the day, I didn't like that either. I think he should have just apologized and don't explain yourself. Just say sorry.
Yeah. It's such an easy controversy to avoid. How we got ourselves into that mess. Ridiculous. Let's hear from Eliza Riley, because we should delve into the team and how their fortunes are going on the field, which, as expected, isn't great, Drew. We're still a battler in the AFLW. So do you want to throw to and just allude to some of the points in this chat?
Eliza Riley from the West follows the AFLW really closely. Also a West Coast fan. So let's catch up with Eliza and give us the breakdown of how it all unfolded last week.
Yeah, so a special guest with us on the nest today, Eliza Riley from the West. She looks after AFLW for West Coast and Fremantle and the AFL men's competition as well. We've got her on as our first guest of 2022. Eliza, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, I think, I'm definitely cooler than you at the moment. It's hot in Perth. It always heats up around Australian Open time in Melbourne for the tennis, but not quite to the level that you're experiencing in the big state right now.
Yeah, it's solid 40 degrees something here today on Wednesday. So I feel for all the people in Perth who don't have aircon right now, but luckily I am one of those people, so I'm just sitting in it all day.
Eliza, what's your West Coast sort of origin story?
So basically was indoctrinated by my family. I know that sounds like a negative, but it was very much a positive because I ended up, in my opinion, supporting the best club in WA. So the whole family are Eagles supporters. The only dissenter is Grandma, who's a Docker, so we have some good family debates there. But yeah, sort of grew up during that 06 premiership time and was running around the backyard with my mates screaming out Juddy and cousins and the like, and sort of had a slight period where I dissented around 07, 08 when we had those crises continually, and sort of defected to Hawthorn for 1 year, which I immensely am disappointed in myself and look back on horrifically, but came back on the Eagles bandwagon pretty soon after that. And obviously now being a journo in Perth have to be pretty unbiased, but I still sort of slap the table in the media box when the Eagles are kick a goal or get up late in the game. So it's hard to hide it, but I do my best.
Who's your favourite all-time Eagle, do you think?
Oh, it's a tough question. There's been so many, but the one that always comes up for me is Mark Lecras. He was definitely my favourite as a kid, just the goals he kicked. And that year when he kicked 12 against Essendon, I remember we were sitting on a family holiday in Bali, and I just, we couldn't watch the game, and we kept refreshing it on the AFL website and going, he's kicked another. And just that continually happened with someone like Lecker. He just knows where to find the goals. So definitely Lecker, and it was great to see him get that premiership in his final game of his career. Oh,
that's the most WA picture that you could paint. You're in Bali trying to watch an Eagles game. Probably Dad's got the Bintang singlet on. And they were good times, especially because we were struggling on the field when Mark Lecras was probably at his best. We look back at those years and all the highlights were really produced by him, kicking goals and, all Australian talk around his form, pushing into the midfield. We spent so much time focusing on Lecras because we were pretty dire for a couple of years there. So, Eliza, I wanted to get you on to talk a bit of AFLW. And then it just so happened that you break a story on the West about some controversy with Pride Round for the Eagles. So let's start there. Take us through the last couple of days and all the information you've gathered.
Yeah, so essentially Pride Round this weekend in the AFLW. Last year was actually the first time the AFL, I guess, introduced a league-wide Pride Round. There'd obviously been the Pride game between Western Bulldogs and Carlton for a few years prior to that, but last year was the first time the AFL said, hey, this is a massive part of our identity. Let's implement it across the whole league. So last year, 5 clubs introduced Pride jumpers for the first time. Sorry, not for the first time. There were some clubs who'd already had them, but a couple of the clubs jumped on board and designed them for the first time. And now this year, a year later, that's expanded to 13 of the 14 clubs. And the only club who won't have a Pride jumper this weekend for Pride Round is the Eagles. So essentially, the reasoning West Coast have given us is that they are releasing a new Indigenous plain jumper this year, which has been designed by Amara Cameron and former player Alicia Jans. So that's a great step because the girls have been playing in the men's design for the first 2 years, but they wanted to sort of create their own sort of identity and their own showing of Indigenous culture in a female-specific design. So, but basically in choosing to do that, the club felt that it was going to be too much to introduce 2 new jumpers in the same year with all the storytelling and education and information that comes with it. So that's the reasoning they've sort of given us, but it has upset quite a few people in the sort of LGBTQI plus community who feel, well, first of all, that the club's probably not representing their whole membership base. And of course, the players, I can't speak for the players, but there is quite a few of girls of that orientation on the team who obviously will be the only team not running out in a Pride jumper this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, from the outside looking in, it seemed like a massive oversight. And obviously you've got a response from the club, which is important. And I can understand where they're coming from, but I'm not sure it really stacks up as a legitimate excuse or a reason. What's the sense that you've got from the reaction to your story from sort of the wider West Coast community?
Yeah, so obviously the whole idea, I guess, of separating sport and politics, that's been one that's sort of come up in pursuing this story. But for me personally, looking at the AFLW, that notion isn't really possible. The AFLW is such an inclusive, gender diverse community. We've just had players this year come out as non-binary for the first time in Tory Groves Little and Darcy Bessio from Carlton. So it's a massively inclusive space. And that massive part of the AFLW's identity is this diversity. So I guess some members, I'm not going to support this opinion, but some members, West Coast members, think that those two things shouldn't be separated. But there is a massive, overwhelming sense of, as well, that it's a poor move by the Eagles, and it's a bad reflection on the club as a whole to be, as we've spoken about, literally the only club who's not wearing a pride jumper this weekend. Every other club has found the money, found the time to do it justice and tell the story involved in producing a pride jumper. So the Eagles have obviously said they're going to bring one in next year, and they're sort of in the process of designing that already. And there will be measures the Eagles are taking this weekend to promote the round, like wearing rainbow socks and a rainbow training top in the warm-up. So it's not like the Eagles are completely dismissing Pride Round. I want to make that very clear, but at the same time, if you can produce a Pride singlet, why not a Pride jumper?
Well, that's it. I mean, at the barest of minimums, you could have just chucked a little rainbow somewhere on the Guernsey. Like, it wouldn't have been that difficult to do. And I mean, you touched on it there. Every other club has found the resources, the time and the money, and West Coast are the most, cash-rich club in the competition. So you would think. And to be honest, the view, certainly from my point of view, is that West Coast have generally been pretty good with this community stuff. And they don't miss that many opportunities to get a PR free kick, of which this would have been one. The chance for the AFL to have all the clubs properly representing Pride rounds with their own Guernseys, which they've done so well with Indigenous round. And so anyway, it was a shock to me, and it's great reporting by you, Eliza. So well done for being first. And it's important that the club is held to account, and they've fallen short of the mark this time. Anyway, we'll follow that with interest. So I wanted to catch up with someone who follows the AFLW program really well. And as much as I'm a massive footy fan, I wouldn't call myself an AFLW aficionado by any stretch. So I wanted to get your thoughts on where you think the AFLW West Coast program is at the moment, Eliza. Has it had much success to this point? We'll talk about the game on the weekend in a moment. But if you had to sum up where the Eagles are at, how would you put it?
Well, so obviously they're a 2020 expansion side. So a lot of clubs had a lot of headway and a head start on the Eagles. So they were one of 4 clubs to enter the league in 2020. And that obviously comes with a lot of issues and recruitment issues, because Fremantle have had the strong hold on the WA talent pool for so long. So I'm not going to say that the Eagles should be further ahead right now, because they have had it quite hard with everything sort of stacked up against them very early on in the piece. But I think the best way to probably describe the Eagles is how they describe themselves at the moment. And that's a developing club. They know where they want to get to. They know that success is where they want to be. But just considering how short the sort of space has been since they've entered the competition in their first 2 years, they've obviously had 3 wins across those 2 years. So I think there are definitely reasons why West Coast aren't near the top of the ladder, and they aren't performing as members would, I guess, like them to be, and qualifying for finals. But as well as that, there have been some off-field issues with the Eagles in terms of, you look at the coaching lineup, they've had 3 coaches in 3 years, which has been unstable, and constant change hasn't really allowed them to sort of embed a game plan and stick to one way or the other. So there's things we can't really, I guess, give the Eagles a free kick on. There has been things that have held them back from getting to where they need to. But I think they're certainly starting to get those structures and those people in the right positions now, and we should see the benefits of it in the coming years. But at the same time, I think it's probably there have been some mistakes made along the way which have prevented them from reaching success quicker.
So you mentioned the coaching situation. So Luke Dwyer, Daniel Pratt and now Michael Pryor. Did they make mistakes in those first two appointments?
It's a difficult one to comment on because obviously all three were internal appointments at the club.
Mm-hmm.
So the club hasn't really looked externally in those coaching appointments at the talent they have had on offer. And there's obviously pretty rich amount of talent, untapped coaching talent in the WA coaching space. But the Eagles have sort of said that they feel like the best candidates were sourced internally and they felt like they had the best people already at the club for the job. So, but I guess in that sense, how can you know that when you're not looking externally, you're not looking at what else is on offer? So I think calling it a mistake is probably a bit of a stretch, but at the same time, you've seen with the results and the constant change that it hasn't exactly benefited the players.
Yeah, no, well, there's no doubt about that. And the results show that. But as you said, they start from a fair way back. And that discussion around Fremantle having the access to the majority of the WA talent pool, that's only exacerbated by the fact that it is still technically a semi-professional sport with the vast majority of the competition having to be doing full-time study or full-time work. It feels like it makes it more difficult to access the full range of talent on offer around the country because of the issues with, COVID and then the fact that these women have got other lives they need to live. So, looking at the last couple of years, the first round draft picks, which obviously West Coast need to develop their club, say an Isabel Lewis and Charlotte Thomas, who have been taken over the last couple of years, have they been, do you feel like the best possible talent that's available, or is it just that West Coast have to look local when they're choosing their next superstars with their first round picks?
Yeah, so certainly the AFLW draft is a state-based draft at the moment. You can have the opportunity to attract interstate talent, but you would have to basically convince them to nominate for WA in the draft pool.
Yeah.
So when we look at the talent pool as a whole on a national level, Bella Lewis and Charlie Thomas were certainly up there as the best players in WA, but they weren't considered the best in the country. Yeah. So that sort of held West Coast back to a certain extent, but at the same time, those two players have very bright futures ahead of them. It's just been, I guess, what you see a bit in the men's competition, whether they can come in and impact the game straight away, which does happen more often in the women's competition. It's interesting to see the pattern, but you do see young 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds come in, play every game in their first season and make an instant impact. So someone like Bella Lewis, she did exactly that. She won the club's best and fairest in her first year. She finished as the best first-year player as well. But that was sort of benefited at the same time with some injuries and selection issues West Coast did have through the midfield. So like someone like Dana Hooker missed the whole season bar one game after she dropped a knife on her foot, and Ash McCarthy as well. She sort of missed a few games towards the back end of the year, which really allowed Bella to develop and take that next step. And someone like Charlie as well. I think what we're seeing with Charlie this year, so she's obviously embedded in the senior team. They're giving her a good opportunity on the wing, but she only played one senior game of Waffle W State League football last year because she fractured her arm in that first game. So I don't think she's making the step up as quickly just because of how far back she's coming.
No, and it's understandable. And as a young player coming into a team that's not winning games, it does make it a little more difficult to carve out that role and perform really well straight away. Anyway, it's an interesting juncture, and the journey is obviously going to be a long and arduous one for West Coast to try and catch up to the rest of the competition. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they expand even further, when the rest of the clubs bring in AFLW teams to the competition. I actually texted you on Sunday because that game against the Suns was pretty entertaining, particularly, it was a slow start to the game, but the last quarter it really kicked into gear. And as much as it was disappointing at the time, I think looking back on it now, to see Gold Coast get that win after being so long without a victory, I guess was kind of good for them, but not great for West Coast. I guess those games that they're being competitive in more often than not is coming against teams who are also expansion sides.
Yeah, certainly. And last time Suns won, it was also against the Eagles back in, I think it was around 6/2020. So it'd been 673 days. Not that the Suns were counting. But I think when you look at West Coast season and their fixture for this season, you really needed to pencil in and say against these fellow expansion sides, this is a game we should be winning. So the Gold Coast obviously entered the league in the same season as the Eagles. They beat them by 1 point last year, and they get 16 points up early in the last quarter and can't close the game out. I don't know if West Coast will find them in many similar or any stronger winning positions later on this year. I mean, I think they face St Kilda later on in the year, who are also a 2020 expansion side and are struggling a bit this year. So maybe that's one they can sort of pencil in as well. And you look at Richmond as well. They're also a 2020 expansion side, but they've taken massive strides this year and look to be a pretty competitive side. So I guess for the Eagles, it's sort of looking at where that first win will come from, considering they've let such a big opportunity slip. But at the same time, the message from the players is we're not winning. That's not a goal. That's not an outcome we're focused on. We're focused on improvement. But from a member point of view, you want to be singing the song.
No, and I don't think any athlete who plays a team sport would really think in their own mind, we don't care about winning. I think it's an easy line to trot out publicly, but they want to get a win and they'll be desperate for it. So it's a fascinating year for West Coast in 2022, that's for sure. Hopefully you'll be a part of it with us on the Nest, Eliza. We appreciate your time. Great to catch up and good luck covering the rest of the AFLW season.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
So, Garby, great to catch up with Eliza, and she is a true blue West Coast fan as well, which we like at the Nest, obviously. So just in the last couple of days, there's been some more developments with the AFLW team. So the AFL are trying to jam in as many fixtures as they can for the women's team. There's obviously complications for Fremantle and West Coast in terms of being stuck away from home. Like, they need to get back to their jobs and their studies, and they have lives to live. They're semi-professional athletes. So they're due to play Friday night against St Kilda and then Tuesday night at Victoria Park against Collingwood. They currently have a COVID outbreak in the team, and they may not be able to field a full side. Now, speaking to Chloe Malloy today, who plays for Collingwood, she said something like 16 players is the minimum, but I can't see that's being correct. You've got to have a bench as well. Now, they are entitled to top-up players, but it's complicated because normally you would take the top-up players from your local contingent. Like West Coast can only draft players who nominate for the WA section of the draft. You can't just draft someone in Victoria who doesn't want to move to WA. So, and there's apparently with the way that top-up players are recruited, a Collingwood VFLW player who is not listed on the AFLW team, they really have set their stall out to play for Collingwood. And the idea of going to train with or being a top-up player at another club is a bit of a no-no. So there might be some hesitance from some of the not listed AFLW players to play for West Coast as a top-up player. That's going to maybe present some challenges for the West Coast AFLW team. So they're second last on the ladder. They haven't won a game this season, only 3 in the club's history, and they may not have a team for Friday night.
Not great. So, all that on top of Michael Pryor's major indiscretion, I think it's fair to say. It's not a great season for them so far. Hopefully they can get fit and firing and register a win or two before the season is out. Lots of great questions, thoughts, comments on Twitter, Drewy, that you put out today. So we thank everyone for buying in. Let's go through. Look, a lot of them we've touched on already. A lot of people asked about Shuey as soon as that news came through. We've obviously answered that. Let's get through as many of the questions that haven't been touched on yet. And this one from Shanae Walton. How much of an impact do you think Willie Rioli will have this year? And do you expect Bailey Williams to be best 22, given the Darling news and our ruck stocks? Surely they give him, Shanae says, as much time as possible to learn off Nick and Kennedy. Yeah, I think big, bad, bustling Bailey plays a fair bit this season. I'm a Bailey Williams fan. I like what he's got. I think he's a lot of talent. I think he'll be a good AFL player. I'm not saying he'll be a star or 150 gamer, but I think he'll be up to the standard. I'd like to see him push this season. But if Harry Edwards is showing some signs in the ruck, and we've talked about how top heavy we might be at the back, he might have to bide his time, and maybe we go with the Harry Edwards, Jeremy McGovern, Oscar Allen hybrid second ruck option between all three of them to chip in for Nick Nat when he's out. But I think Bailey Williams will play a bit. And yeah, as we said before, I'm excited about Willie. He looks fit. He's had a long pre-season now, so he should be right to go.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing some development from Bailey this season. I mean, we've got to be patient with Ruckman. And obviously we know that there's not a million spots available in the best 22. So hopefully when he gets his opportunity, he can show something, which he has previously. There's a bit of rawness to him, which we need to see improve, and that needs to be sort of massaged out of his game, but that just comes with time. So looking forward to seeing what Bailey can do in 2022. I'm excited for Willie Rioli. It's right at the top of my list of things I'm looking forward to in the 2022 season. I mean, let's not forget how much of an impact he's made as a West Coast player. And it's not about just looking at AFL tables and seeing how many goals he's kicked. Like, it's pressure. It's the things you don't get stats for. It's understanding that there's someone who can chase down, tackle you, pick up the ball and snap it from the pocket. Knowing that he's around, like, that makes a difference to everyone else who's out on the field, whether it's our players or the opposition. So looking forward to seeing how Willie can go this year as well.
Well, he's so Rioli-like. I mean, and Adam Simpson said in a press conference towards the end of last year that little bit of magic that only he can provide, he's still got that. He hasn't lost that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great to see. And I just think back to that 2018 grand final. I remember being asked in an interview afterwards for a podcast, who was the player that you don't think got the credit for their performance on the day that you think deserved more? And I remember mentioning Willie, because I think whenever he touched the ball, something happened. He might have only got it 12 times or something, but he kicks that goal in the first quarter. He sets up the goal for Cripps. Every time he went into the midfield or went into a contest, he came out, clean hands, dished it off to someone. That's what he brings us. And that's what we need more than anything right now, efficiency and disposal. He gets it and he makes something happen every time, but not just as a forward pocket or half forward. He does it on the ball when he's up and going at his best, like in the midfield. So, yeah, can't wait to see him hopefully get back to what he was doing prior to his break. So some more questions. A lot of people asking about Shuey, and we've touched on all of that. This is a comment from Kylie Perry. All for Jack Darling making the choice that's best for himself, but he did the club dirty by not admitting he wasn't going to get the jab. We don't know how the discussions panned out. Maybe they thought they could convince him right until the end. He says he would have known before the trade period. Maybe the club could have kept Brander or targeted another key forward. Yeah, I can't remember the exact discussions around vaccination at the end of last season, but I reckon the club would have thought he'll come round, we'll convince him, like, surely he's not going to give up his career, and they just couldn't. So you don't really know how those discussions took place. We've discussed. It
sounded like Brander was going to go anyway.
Yeah.
You see from Dan here talking about the need for top-up players during the year and a talent pool available in the waffle. I just noted down some names of guys. If we had to call someone up for a game or two, who would we look at? So Bailey Rogers won the Sandover medal last year as a midfielder from Claremont. I actually don't know a lot about him, but I would imagine as a Sandover medalist, he'd be someone who'd be on our radar. Joe Bolton, who we know is a couple of Sandovers in his career. Hayden Sloyth, who played for Fremantle. He's continued playing at a really high level for South Fremantle. And then it's either Tyler Keatle or Tyler Keitel. He won the leading goal kicker award. And I remember watching him in his draft year playing for WA in the under 18s. He's got a bit of talent. If we were down, if Kennedy, Allen and Darling, God forbid, all got COVID at the same time in the forwards group, he might be someone you'd pull out for a top up. But there's a lot of good players in the waffle where we're pretty certain could play a solid role at AFL level if called upon. So that would be an extra interesting element to the season, wouldn't it? I mean, watching the Big Bash and seeing, the plumbers and the part-timers and, the guys who are dominating Premier Cricket get a chance to play, as much as it is a little bit village, like it has been sort of fun to see those guys come in.
Yeah, I mean, cricket can do that. Big Bash, it's a closed-off league. I mean, I guess the AFL is as well. Like, people have said, why are A-League games being postponed when the Big Bash is going on? Because in the A-League, you can't just pull a player out of nowhere and register him. There are transfer windows designed by FIFA. You can't just do that. In cricket, you can, I guess. And I guess you can in the AFL. They can change the rules. They're not governed by a world body or anything like that.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll go down that route? Do you think there'll be a top-up player system for the season?
Well, I think that they would be negligent if they weren't discussing the possibility of having some sort of pool of players. But I don't even know if you have to. Maybe you just say everyone has to nominate to be part of the free agency pool. And if we are required to use it, we will. I just don't like the idea that if we got to round 5 and then one team or a couple of teams get decimated and you just make it up on the run, like it's a decision that should be made at the start of the season. But you kind of don't know what you need until you need it, like as silly as that sounds. So we'll wait and see, but nothing would surprise me at this point. I mean, everyone's probably going to get it. So,
yeah. I'm just freaking out about fantasy football, to be honest. So how are you going to manage that? That's the big worry for me right now.
You know what and you know what the AFL will say initially is that, well, there's 45 guys on your list. So until you've got less than 22 or 23 available, then we're not even going to think about it. Like the players on your list are there to play.
This comment from Loz C. Boys, I like that Jack Darling is standing up for himself. His own government moves the goalpost, so why shouldn't he? Yeah, entitled to your opinion, Loz. All right, we'll leave the big one until last. That is our best 22s. That's from Austin Skilton. So we'll get to that in a moment. This comment from Dan Kloonster. Jack running his own race is disappointing. 100% certain he has no idea what the long-term impact is. Just trust the medical experts and focus on a premiership. With you there, Dan, of course. Joe Blogg's given a couple of good questions. How do Greg Clark and Campbell Chesser fit into our side come round 1? He was the player I had down on my list to mention in terms of impressing in pre-season, Campbell Chesser, more just with the attitude, like driving from Adelaide, quarantining over Christmas, just to get on the, that's a huge impact on his standing within the group. When you're a youngster, you don't necessarily have to do that stuff, but you choose to get stuck into the thick of it straight away. Mate, your stocks rise enormously with supporters and players and coaches by doing something like that. I like Jeremy McGovern having a little crack at him as well. He was asked about the first-year players. He said, Campbell Chesser put his shirt on for the first time today. That was nice to see. So obviously, he's this new generation. He's got a good rig. You like showing it off. I'm sure someone like Jeremy McGovern can't relate to that. But, hey, he's putting in the hard work. Who cares what he does otherwise? Yeah, I'm excited by him. And Greg Clark, look, I don't see how he plays round 1, judging by all the players we've got available if they're all fit. But he's mature age. He shouldn't be too far away, you'd think. So hopefully he's there thereabouts. Hopefully he's impressing.
Love this from Campbell Chesser. On the way through in South Australia, he trained with, I think, Glenelg. But it was via former West Coast player Matt Allen, who didn't play a game, and Luke Partington, who both play at the same club in South Australia. So he sort of reached back into West Coast lineage to create a connection, and he was able to train while he was doing his 2 weeks in South Australia, which I really liked. Honestly, he could not have impressed me more with the way that he handled that entire situation. And I think it gives us a little insight into the personality, professional, committed, wants to impress. I think it's a really nice start for Chesser. Can't wait to see him play.
Yeah. Well said. He seems like a smart, switched on cookie. So that's really encouraging ahead of the new season from our first draft pick. All right, this one from Austin Skilton. Can we get both of the lads to give their best 22 round 1, assuming we have a 100% fit list? Very interested in opinions on this. All right, Drewy, let's go through the lines. Let's go back line, midfield, forward, our interchange, and knock them off that way so we can compare how we go. So why don't you go your back line first, and then I'll respond.
Hearn, Barrass, Witherden, Duggan, McGovern, Foley is my back 6.
Okay. I'm 5 of 6. So I'm Hearn, Barrass, Tommy Cole in the back pocket, Duggan, McGovern, Witherden. So you've got Foley instead of Cole. That's interesting. Starting back 6. Okay. Talk us through that one, because, I'm a big Tommy Cole fan, as you know. I know you are too. How does Foley get in ahead of him to start round 1?
Well, Cole is in the starting 18.
Okay.
But I absolutely love Luke Foley. I'm a massive fan. He's the future. And he's basically, as far as I'm concerned, Shep 2.0, except a left footer. So, what is he a left footer? Or am I making that up? Anyway, Shep 2.0.
He's more Shannon Hearn 2.0 for me with his roost and his makeup. But all right, I like that you're backing the youngster. All right, midfield. Gaff on a wing, Shuey in the middle, assuming everyone's fit. That's the criteria. Jackie Redden on a wing. We're a little bit slow there, but I think we can make up for it in other areas. And then Nick, Yo, Kelly. So our on-ball brigade, Shuey, Yo, Kelly, Redden and Gaff on the wings, Nick in the ruck.
Yeah, so Gaff, Yo, Cole. So I've got Cole on a wing.
Yeah, I like that.
And with the flexibility of Duggan or Foley to also play in that second wing position. But they're the responsible wingmen, and Gaff is the ball hunting on the left side, doing, Gaff things. And I'm not saying that Cole is training as a wingman. I'm just saying this is what I would do. Yeah. And then Nick, Nat, Shuey, Kelly.
Okay, so pretty straightforward there. All right, forward line, you want to lead us off there?
Yeah, so this is the new age West Coast forward line. And I've also made the decision to leave Darling out. So Rioli, Allen, Ryan, Cripps, Kennedy, and SPP as a front six. So obviously SPP switching
SPS.
through them. Sorry, yeah. I was
thinking of Sam
about
Power Pepper.
SPS. I was thinking of supplementary player pickup or whatever it was. The SPP. Sorry. Petrevsky, Seaton switching into the mids, as well as Rioli spending a bit of time in there as well. But it's 2 talls, 4 smalls, ball hits the deck, we're still a threat, and we've got 2 of the best key forwards in the comp.
Okay. I've kept Darling in there for now. So I've got, Liam Ryan on a half forward flank, Darlington a half forward, Cripps on a half forward flank, Oscar Allen in there, JK in there, and then Sam Petrevsky Seaton in there as well. So very similar forward lines. Only one difference, that would be Rioli for, I assume you got Oscar on your interchange? Or you've left Darling out, so that's your difference.
Yeah.
Just left Darling out completely. Okay. So we're going to be very similar then, because I've got Darling in there. So then my interchange, I've got Harry Edwards interchange, not buying into that discussion we had around the rucks. So I can see at this stage us going more of a Harry Edwards, Oscar Allen, Jeremy McGovern hybrid version of a second ruck rather than just Bailey Williams. But it might be Bailey, which I wouldn't have an issue with. And then I've got Dom Sheed, Willie Rioli, and I've got Zach Langdon on the interchange. I've got him in the 22. So if Darling's out, Rioli goes into the forward line to make it the exact same forward 6 that you've got. And I've got Josh Rotham coming into the team, into the interchange for Jack Darling.
Yep.
So very similar. So Harry Edwards, Sheed, Rioli, and Zachy Langdon as my interchange.
So then I've got Sheed, Waterman.
Yep.
Harry Edwards, and Isaiah Winder.
Jeez. Bolter.
As our
Bolter.
We need pace. We need skill. I'm looking to the future.
That's a big bolter. Yeah, I mean, the unlucky ones for me are Jakey Waterman, Foley, Jackson Nelson, Jermaine Jones. Yeah, they're the ones who are just missing out. Greg Clark, maybe Campbell Chesser.
Yep.
So they're the unlucky ones, but that's the way I've gone. Look, we never start a season with all 22 fit. So that's not going to happen. So other guys are going to be in there. But I like the way you're thinking with a couple of bolters there. I think the likes of Langdon and Rioli and Petrevsky Seaton can give us that extra bit of pace. And then Witherden off halfback, who didn't play a lot last season, but showed good signs at the end. They can help make up for some of the disposal inefficiency and the lack of zip that we certainly missed last campaign. So I still think there's enough there in my team, but I like a couple of your selections to compensate for it, Drewy.
And there's an asterisk on Chesser. Like if he comes out and shows promise in the preseason, then I'd love to see him in from the get-go. Who's your medi sub? I mean, that is a position now.
Jakey Waterman. Yeah, I like what Jakey provides. So
yeah, I think I'd have Redden or Rotham as a medi sub.
So Redden's not in your best 22,
and I love Redden.
After last season,
it's line ball between him and Sheed, and I'm looking to the future. Like I said, there's pace, there's skill, but I love him. I think that he is a depth midfielder this season, unless we see something. I mean, Shuey, who knows? And and she, let's hope that his form is consistent throughout the whole year. I mean, he did end up having a pretty good year last year. So I think he's got to start ahead of Redden.
We said that about Redden last season. And then, I think after Yo and Kelly, but they missed a lot of games, he was our third best midfielder. I think overall contribution, he was arguably our best when you look at the amount of games played. He also, I noticed as well, they said that he was going to be out for a while. And then in some of the photos they released the other day, he was doing kicking drills. Like, he had his shoulder strapped. I'm sure he wasn't doing contest work. But I read between the lines that his recovery is progressing a lot better than expected. So that's good to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's positive. Look, if someone like Redden is starting the year outside of the best 22, it's a positive.
Yeah.
It means we've got 25, 26 good players to pick from.
Drewy, good to chat all things Eagles. Few positive things there, but let's be honest, it hasn't been the best news period in our club's history. Let's hope that's the end of it. We get some good news on Luke Shuey by the time you're listening to this, and better news for the club moving forward. And we can have a big 2022. A couple of months to go between now and round one, so no doubt we'll have, over the next couple of months, a couple more editions before we get into it 100%, mate.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.